And upon the conclusion of this summit, we will send the recording out to you as well as presentation materials. So I want to welcome everybody to our very first high school work-based learning internship summit. We are thrilled to be hosting this event for all of you. Our goal is to help employers get connected to our high school students. So my name is Jenny Gino, and I'm the Executive Director of Career and Technical Education for the Saginaw Intermediate School District. And I'm also the Career Education Planning District Director for Saginaw County. The goal of this summit is to provide you with a good understanding of how to partner with high schools to get the talent that you need. You'll receive helpful tools and resources to help you get started, as well as the opportunity to ask questions of our experts. Please place any questions you may have in the chat, and we will address them at the conclusion of the presentation. With that, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. Dr. Brian Piles is the State Director for the Michigan Department of Education, Office of Career and Technical Education. As Director, Dr. Piles' primary role is to provide leadership for Michigan's secondary and post-secondary career and technical education programs to ensure learners have access to equitable, high quality, and rigorous academic instruction under the CTE system. Brian works closely with other Michigan Department of Ed office directors, the Michigan Department of Ed leadership team, as well as other state agencies to achieve key components in Michigan's top 10 strategic education plan. At the national level, Dr. Piles is active with the CTE State Directors Association and Advanced CTE, providing input regarding policy implementation, as well as insights into the impact of decisions made at the national level. His background includes 25 years in the Michigan public school system, serving as a marketing teacher, DECA advisor, business department chair at Niles Senior High School, and as a regional CTE director in Shiawassee and Berrien counties. Through Brian's ability to collaborate, he led the development of the Berrien County Early Middle College and the Genesee County Career and Technical Education Early Middle College. His passion for CTE began with his experience as a CTE student in the agri-science program at the Oakland Schools Technical Campus in Clarkston, Michigan. Throughout his career, Brian has been an active leader, serving on various committees with the Michigan Department of Education and as president for the Michigan Association for Career and Technical Education and the Michigan Marketing Educators. Brian has also served as an independent education consultant, where he developed education web content for the Michigan Association of Career and Technical Education and wrote guidance for the Southern Regional Education Board for the implementation of work-based learning and student career planning. Dr. Piles has a bachelor's degree in business education from Eastern Michigan University and a master's and PhD in education leadership from Western Michigan University. His dissertation research, a study of career preparation activities used in Michigan's high schools, reflects his commitment to CTE learning opportunities for students. Please help me welcome Dr. Brian Piles.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you for another invitation to come speak in Shiawassee County, in Saginaw County. I'm so excited about the growth that we've experienced under Jenny's leadership in Saginaw County. When you think about all the hours that she spent in building all the partnerships and leveraging a large team to have the millage passed for career and technical education. And today is one of those really positive outcomes of the millage that the community supported. And so I want to just give hats off to my friend Jenny Gino for her leadership and all that's happening in Saginaw County. And so it's my pleasure to be with all of you today. When you think about a career and technical education program, a career and technical education program can be an elective program in a school, or there's a significant difference if you're a state approved career and technical education program through the Michigan Department of Education. And for state approved programs, the core difference is that teachers are committed to delivering a set of state standards through 4 components of education. All programs in all courses in our school districts have an instructional classroom component. Many of our programs, when you look at science programs and theater programs and fine arts programs, have a really strong laboratory component as well. And CTE has that strong laboratory component. What sets state approved programs off from other general ed programs is the commitment for all students to experience work-based learning and for all students to experience student leadership. So there are 4 key instructional components: classroom instruction, work-based learning, student leadership, and laboratory. And today we're here to focus on work-based learning. And I applaud you for your commitment to coming to the summit to help provide experiences for our young people in Saginaw County, and probably students around Saginaw County and other adjacent counties that might literally experience work-based learning through employers in the region. When you think about work-based learning, it's important that we focus on the current practice that we have, and that it's more than just what I experienced back in 1982 and 83 as co-op. We have really grown our understanding of work-based learning. And today, our education consultant, who is with us and presenting, Selena Mills, will be talking about the different types of work-based learning. And we have documents that she'll be sharing with you from the department that show a really progressive intensity to work-based learning, and that you begin with like level 1 work-based learning activities, and then you progress up to level 4. And Selena will be sharing those with you. And we really have a much broader understanding of the importance of making sure that students have a variety of work-based learning experiences. And so the first piece, if I can encourage all of you, is to call it work-based learning. Co-op is a component of work-based learning. It's one of the strategies that we use. I believe that work-based learning in career and technical education in our state-approved programs provides experiences for students that they would not legally be allowed to participate in if it wasn't a state-approved program. Because we do have youth employment regulation from the federal government that regulates the type of work-based learning students can experience with employers. And if you're in a state-approved program, you can do more experiences. For example, a student in automotive, you have to be in a state-approved program in work-based learning with a training plan and training agreement to go under a hoist and work on a vehicle. If you're not in a state-approved program, you are not legally allowed to be under the hoist of a vehicle for training purposes when you're under the age of 18. And that's another core difference within work-based learning that sets our state-approved programs aside from a general education program, and providing them with much more intensive experiences. And so as I thought about today, I reflect back on my experience that I had as a high school CTE student. And when I was in high school CTE in my agri-science program, my teacher set us up with contracted experiences. And so she taught us how to be independent contractors. And so a friend of mine and I, we went out and we solicited bids, and we laid paver brick patios for people. We pruned or like small orchards that people would have on their properties. We did pool cleaning, and we did all this as independent contractors as 16-year-olds. And what a great and valuable skill that she taught me, because I carried that contract work from when I was a teacher. I did contracted work in the summer, training other teachers, through the experiences that Jenny articulated when she so graciously introduced me. And so what you provide as an employer will make such a difference for students like Brian, who in 1980s experienced this and carried these skills on for many years. And so thank you so much for joining us here today. Jenny, Gino, thank you for your tireless leadership in providing this experience for your school districts and your employers. I'm going to introduce a member of my staff, Ms. Selena Mills. Selena was a CTE teacher. She was a CTE Technical Center principal, and she was also a county director like Jenny prior to coming to the Department of Education. And now at the Department of Education, Selena supervises our health science programs and cosmetology programs and some other programming, along with working with Mr. Lee Greenacre, who's also here today, one of our education consultants, with work-based learning and helping to answer questions. And so it's my pleasure, Selena, to introduce you today.
Thank you, Brian. It is great to be here today. It's always exciting when employers are ready and willing to engage with our students, because we know that's what really makes the best learning. And our goal in education is to make them ready for you. So before I start, I'm going to pull up some slides, but I want to introduce a couple of people that I brought along with me. So I'll ask Lee to introduce himself, and then Jill, if you'll follow up and introduce yourself before we get started and kind of tell us a little bit about what each of you do, so that folks know who you are and your area of expertise.
Thank you, Selena. I'm Lee Greenacre. I work at the Michigan Department of Education, Office of Career and Technical Education. I am the second, as they have said, on the work-based learning area. We also work on many other things there, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks, Jenny, for setting this up.
Good morning. My name is Jill Hookey. I work for the state of Michigan's Wage and Hour Division, and we enforce several Michigan statutes. Selena asked me here today because the main one that would impact you is the Youth Employment Standards Act, the act that regulates the employment of kids under 18 in a regular employment situation when they're not on a work-based learning contract. But we also do minimum wage and overtime, payment of wages, paid medical leave, human trafficking notifications. So that's my expertise.
And thank you, both of you. I thought there might be some questions later today that other experts in the department could answer for you as well. So when we think about students and youth employment and work-based learning, a lot of times we think back to what we first did. And I'm sure you all remember your first job, how nervous you were and how excited you were, and how much you actually learned and took away from that. But one of the things that we're finding today is that youth employment, and in particular, when you look at this graph, summer jobs, aren't as readily available to students anymore as they once were. So you can kind of see that decline there. We really, in about 2010, hit an all-time low in youth employment and summer jobs. And so if you look at that and you think about the number of students that had the same experiences in 2010 that we did when we were teenagers, about 75% or more of them aren't getting that work experience prior to leaving high school. And in fact, what you don't see on this chart is that we thought we were climbing back at one point until the pandemic hit. And now we believe that there's going to be an even lower low this coming summer, that it will be less than 23% of students that actually have a summer job. And those summer jobs are really our first chance to practice. So in your first job, that was the first time that you probably got to interact with an employer, someone who could give you feedback on your work skills. It was probably the first time other than school that you had to show up and follow a schedule on a regular basis, and that you took some really good instruction and direction from someone other than your teacher and your parents. And so when we see issues in the workplace today, and we think about the struggles that we have as employers, students or workers who are on their phones too much, who aren't showing up on time, who aren't working as much or as productively as we'd like them to be, sometimes it's because their job with you is their very first work experience. And we know that practice is what students need to be able to be good at being a good worker. And so that's the beauty of work-based learning, is introducing that practice to students prior to actually being hired. And there are other benefits to students as well. really, work-based learning also helps them perfect and understand that academic aspect. You know, it really becomes real when you're studying something like math, when you're using it in the workplace and you see how you're going to use it beyond high school. And work-based learning helps students make that connection. And then we talked about the employability skills that they also practice, and it also helps them fix and address any issues that they might have inadvertently with work ethic. And it instills that strong work ethic in them. You know, it's sometimes your first opportunity to actually be paid to work. And that also is a motivator for students. They see what it's going to be like in the future. Now, the benefits aren't just to students. So you as employers have benefits as well. Hiring or even participating in a work-based learning experience with a student, if it's unpaid, is beneficial to you because those students bring a new and fresh perspective. You know, they're looking at things in a much different way than what we used to, and they're looking at things with an outside set of eyes. So sometimes when those students come in and they ask lots of questions, it's because they're trying to gain an understanding and look at things through their lens. And bringing that lens to you as employers can be really beneficial. It also tends to increase productivity. So when someone who's really excited to be able to work and, you know, absolutely enthused about their first job or their first work experience comes in, that spreads and radiates off of them to other folks. And when people see them excited about work, it reinvigorates the rest of the workers that you employ. And then finally, probably the biggest benefit to you as employers is that when you participate in a work-based learning experience with a student, you actually have the opportunity to start developing your workforce. Now, even if that's an unpaid opportunity, that's like a really long interview, and you get a chance to get to know someone and to train them and to have the opportunity to perhaps hire them in the future without making a commitment to something that you don't know. In turn, you also have the opportunity when you impact that one student to impact the entire rest of their class. Because most of the time that student goes back and they talk to their teacher and they talk to other students and they're excited about what they're learning. And they talk about some of the new and neat things that you're doing in your place of employment that they haven't gotten to try or do yet in the classroom. And that becomes infectious, and other folks can learn from that as well. So Dr. Piles talked a little bit about this, but we keep using that term work-based learning, and it may be a new term to some of you. So we want to really explain what that means. So in CTE, we follow the federal Perkins definition of work-based learning, and it really contains three big components for us. So work-based learning is when there is some sort of sustained interaction with an employer or an industry partner, and it centers around tasks or learning objectives that students have so that they can grow their knowledge and skill. And you'll see on your screen here the formal definition, but if you look at those three bold parts, that's really what constitutes work-based learning. And again, it's valuable for our students because it's an opportunity to have that first real-world experience. And when we think back on that idea of declining summer jobs, even if a student isn't able to get employment in a summer job, having an interaction with you as an employer is as valuable because they're getting that feedback and that professional interaction that they would get if they were working. So Dr. Piles also talked about the continuum that we follow. And I want to just take a brief minute. We'll share this with you later so that you can look at it in more depth, but to talk about this continuum. And when we think about work-based learning, we think about it in terms of a continuum because we know that it's really cyclical. As students come in and they start to think about what their career goals are, they do a lot of career awareness. And so this is an area that you can participate with teachers and in classrooms just by helping students to understand what is it that you do at your company? What is your job? Things like field trips and tours and coming in and working with students in a classroom, that's all part of that awareness. It's really helping them to think about, is this something that I'd like to know more about? Is it something that I'd like to do? and it allows them to look for mentors out in the profession. Then as you move around that continuum, you move to career exploration. And usually this is done in more of a one-on-one interaction between an individual student and an employer or industry partner. So think of things like job shadows or informational interviews, where the student is coming in and asking you specifically more about what it is that you do. And usually what's happening here is that the student was starting to find an interest area, and they're really starting to connect to your profession or your particular job. And they want to dig in and know a little bit more because they're thinking it might fit their skill set or their interests or both. So the way that you can participate in this area is, again, by making connections with schools and teachers. And when individual students reach out, even if it might be a little bit clunky sometimes because they're learning how to do that, engaging with that student or engaging with that group of students is really beneficial because they want to know more about what you do. Then as you continue to move around the continuum, you'll see down towards the bottom, we have career preparation, career training, and youth apprenticeship. And these areas are where students are really going to dig in and they're going to start trying and practicing things. So for you, the opportunities in career preparation are maybe to go into the classroom and teach a group of students how to do something, or to bring a group of students to you and start demonstrating some of the things that you do and letting them try in a very safe way some of those skills and get some practice. Once we move into career training, this is where CTE students really shine. And this is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Career training is what you're probably thinking of when you think of that term co-op. This is where a student is engaged for a much more extended period of time with you at your area of business, and they're really doing and practicing and trying things. They're working on a regular basis, whether it's paid or unpaid. And then we also have youth apprenticeships that we're trying to grow in Michigan. And I know that some of you are very familiar with that. So again, we think of this as a continuum because if you think about your own trajectory and your own career, you know, we all dabbled in a few things and we had an awareness of some jobs that might be of interest to us. And then as we started digging into those careers, there were some that we went, nope, that's not for me. And then there were others that we said, you know what, I think I'm really interested in this. And so you really have to start to move around that continuum and then go back and start again as you dig deeper and deeper into your career interest area. And that's what we want students to do. And here in Michigan, we actually are asking teachers and schools to partner with businesses to help do that from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So don't be surprised if some of your local districts are asking for you to come in and work with students, even in an elementary level, because they're starting that career awareness early so that students can interact with you and be prepared when they hit high school to participate in that preparation and training. Now, I alluded to the fact that there are some things that CTE students can do that other students can't. And so I want to kind of show you these differences. And you'll get this slide deck later as well so that you can really take a peek at these. But in general, all of our students can participate in work-based learning. But there are some advantages for CTE students and some of the things that they can do. So you'll see in my Venn diagram here the differences between them. If you are a non-CTE student, you really have a wide variety of placement opportunities because likely that student is still searching for what it is that they want to do. And they need to be placed in an area that's related to something that they're taking at school, but it doesn't have to be a direct correlation the way that a CTE student is required to have. So, and then you'll see in the middle, both of them have the same types of documentation, and both students, non-CTE and CTE, benefit from your feedback and the practice that they get around soft skills or employability skills when they partner with you. We really want to focus today on CTE students because CTE students are classified as what we call student learners. And student learners qualify for some exemptions in the federal law that allow them to do things that are perhaps a little bit more hazardous than other students. And that's because those CTE students possess safety training and occupational skills that they've learned in their class, and they're ready to be able to do that. So when a CTE student comes to you, there are some things that we can guarantee. We can guarantee that that CTE student has been provided safety training, and sometimes they've even earned safety credentials that they're going to be able to show you. And they've done that in their classroom. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to provide some things as well, because you all definitely have your areas of specialty, but they're going to come in with a very general sense of that and a lot of training behind it. Then CTE students have really had some intentional employability skill training. That's one key component of our curriculum in every single program area that instructors have to hit. So we're going to be working on those things with them before you ever see them. We still want your feedback, and we still want you to help guide and mentor them, but they're going to come with more experience than maybe your average high school student would. And then we already mentioned they've got some of those technical skills, and their teacher or their work-based learning coordinator, as they work with you, can tell you about what those skills are. And then finally, you may have had input into their curriculum. So each of our CTE programs is run by an advisory board along with the teacher. And that advisory board meets at least 2 times a year. And the requirement is that it has to be made up of a majority of business and industry folks. And they come in and look at our curriculum, they look at our work-based learning and leadership opportunities, and they give us feedback. So they say, you know what, it's really important that you hit this a little bit harder. This is what we're seeing in the workplace, and this is what's coming, and this is what students need to know. They might also give us feedback and say, I've got a couple of students in a work-based learning placement, and here is where I saw they were lacking when they came in. And so if you can beef these things up before they get to us, that will make them better prepared. And so that feedback and interaction for us is really key in designing our programs. And so just a little plug, if you're not part of an advisory committee in your area of expertise, seek one out, because teachers need that and we crave that in CTE. That's what helps us make our programs better and helps us make our students ready for you. So you can guarantee these things. You can also guarantee that your student has had leadership training and that they are more prepared to assert what they need to help work with part of a team and to help lead and guide other folks when given the opportunity. So in CTE, we tend to see some very basic myths that come out when we talk with employers. And sometimes people think that there are things that they can't do. And so we wanted to talk through a few of those myths for you. And I also want to let you know, you're going to get some of these in a draft form so that you have this information in case you need it. So the first big myth is, we can't hire minors. They are prohibited from working in our jobs. Our jobs are, sometimes kind of hazardous. And there's a lot of safety training that goes on. So we touched on the facts behind this, that there are student learner exemptions, and there still are some things that CTE students can't do, but the school district that you're partnering with or that the student is coming from, they'll be able to help you understand what it is that a student can and can't do so that you don't always have to figure those things out on your own. And then again, our CTE students have that occupational and safety training. And when you work with a student in a work-based learning placement, there is ongoing collaboration with that instructor or a school district personnel person. And so you're going to be able to talk with them back and forth. And again, help develop and guide that student, but you're not doing it in isolation. So our second big myth is, again, our industry is too dangerous. And this is kind of what we talked about before. There are those exemptions. And in addition to all of this, there are going to be site visits before the student is ever placed and on a regular basis, at least every 9 weeks while the student is there. And during those site visits, the program instructor or the work-based learning coordinator is going to look for things that might be too dangerous for students. They're going to ask you questions about the types of safety training and safety protocols that you have. And it's their job to be looking out for those things. So if they have concerns, they'll come to you, and they'll also talk to you about what types of safety training the student had, and then what types they might need that they haven't been exposed to yet that you'll need to provide at the work site. One of the other big myths that we get is insurance isn't going to allow us to hire. And there are insurance requirements for work-based learning. In fact, those insurance requirements are probably the very same ones that you already have for all of your employees. So when you're looking at a work-based learning partnership and you're ready to have a student come in either in an unpaid or a paid situation, you have to provide for the school district verification of your liability insurance and workers' compensation insurance. Now, those things protect your employees. And if you hire a student in a work-based learning situation and you're paying them, they become your employee and they are protected under those things as well. In addition to that, the school also has insurance coverage to help protect students. So really, most of the time, our students are triple protected. They have the school's coverage, they have the basic coverage that you have as an employer, and they have their own personal coverage as well. So that's not something to be fearful of. And again, that's why we ask for that information, to make sure that we know we can place our students and that it will all be okay. And then finally, the other big myth that we hear is that, you know, your company or HR won't allow you to hire minors under the age of 18 due to those liability factors. And a lot of times it's a company policy that might be a barrier for this. And so there are practices that you can put in place and that you can work with school districts to put in place that help really ensure those safe work environments. And when you get our copy of the myth versus fact, like one-page guide that's coming to you after this, you'll be able to see some of those different practices. So let's say all of these myths don't apply and you're ready to kind of get involved, but you want to know a little bit more. So how do you know what a student can do? You know, we talked about those student exemptions, but how do you know what they are and how that works? So typically there is a teacher or a work-based learning coordinator for the district that you're working with, and they understand those hazardous occupation exemptions. So they're going to be able to help you and help guide you and tell you this is what a student can do and this is what they can't in your place of employment. They're also going to give you some feedback based on what you think you might need. And again, they'll let you know if a student can do that and if a student has even learned the things to be ready to do that. And then finally, when you're ready to dive in and commit, there's something called a training plan that we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. And in that training plan, it's a written documentation of what the student is able to do. So it's, you know, it's more than just a conversation. They'll give that to you in writing. So again, how do you get started? I flip my screen and show you something that we have for you, but we're going to give you a getting started checklist, and that's going to show you what steps you would take to actually get started. So let me flip my screen for you here so that you can see this. So this is our started checklist, and it gives you an idea of what kinds of things you need to do if you're interested in working with students in a work-based learning placement. So things like first determining your level of commitment and engagement. How much involvement do you want to have and for how long? How many students do you think you can work with? There might be one and it might be for a short duration, and that's perfectly okay because we appreciate your involvement in any way that you can give it. But it may be that you have multiple opportunities. And so determining what's good for you and your company is important right up front. And then from the other thing that's really important is kind of identifying where you're going to need future skilled workers. Because again, this is your opportunity to impact your skilled workforce that's coming in the future. So when you start to think about where you need people, that might be an area to engage in work-based learning. And then finally, we gave you some links about how to collaborate with folks and what comes next. So you'll see those on this guide that you're going to be getting. And I want to point out in particular, this link right here for your CPID administrator or your CTE administrator. Those folks really know all of the rest of the people in your county that could be impacted by work-based learning. So if you don't know where to go, click on this link. It's going to get you to your local county or region, and it's going to get you to their website so that you can find and connect with that person. And once you connect with them, they'll guide you to the other people who might be able to help. So we're going to give you that after today so that you have that and you have access to it. So now we also talked just a little bit about documentation. And I know this can be something really scary. So I want to take just a minute to dive into this a little bit and reassure you it's not as bad as what you might sometimes think. So there are 3 big pieces of documentation that you need if you're going to get started. That first piece is the one that we talked about just a minute ago, that proof of liability insurance and workers' compensation. So once you have located that information and you have that, then we're able to, as school district personnel, help you work on placements. The other big thing is identifying what kind of hours that you have available or what kind of schedule you might have for a student placement, because we still do have to work within the student's school schedule. Now, that doesn't mean they have to be placed during that period of time, but we're trying to make sure that they're not getting too many hours someplace and that we can make their required classes and that schedule work with when you need them. So identifying that right up front will help us as school district personnel find the right fit for you. And then finally, a rough list of jobs or tasks that you want students to be able to learn or you think are important for them to know will be really helpful when we start looking at placement. What you're going to do is you're going to take that list of tasks and you'll be talking with school district personnel or that work-based learning coordinator about what those things are. And their job is to fill out this piece that you see on the screen. This is the training plan. And there are 2 documents that they're likely to talk about, a training plan and a training agreement. And sometimes from those, you might actually only see 1 document because it is possible to combine them. So you may see 2, you may see 1, but this documentation is actually their job and you're just the collaborator. So they're going to take that list of things that you gave them and they're going to put that into the training plan and then run it back by you to make sure that it's okay. So let me give you an example of it. It would look something like this. If you're in the manufacturing sector and you're looking for a student who can do some milling and grinding and maybe some CNC work, then you would identify those things. Our work-based learning instructor or program teacher would go back to the training plan and back to the curriculum that they've been teaching their CTE student, and they would pull these 3 standards. So here are things that students are learning in the classroom that they already know how to do that's going to correspond with what you're asking. Now, again, the student isn't an expert in this area, but they're coming in with a lot more knowledge and skill than someone coming off the street who hasn't been part of a CTE program. So they're walking in with a little bit of knowledge, and then together you're going to help mentor that student, both at the work site and in the classroom, to increase their skill and get them a lot more proficient and competent a lot faster. And then finally, here's the training agreement. And I chopped it up into 3 parts for you because there's actually 3 parts of this document that you are going to touch. And so I want to show you those because, again, on the screen, it looks a little bit scary, but the school district personnel folks or the work-based learning coordinators are really going to be heading up and leading this work, and they're just going to be asking for your input. So the first section here should be pretty easy. You're just going to provide your employer information. And you can see if you look on your screen that it's just, the name of your business, and then it's those policy information pieces about your insurance that also go here. And then you may be asked to provide a job title for students so that the work-based learning coordinator knows exactly what job that student is doing. Then here's the section that we also talked about earlier, identifying those hours. Once you've identified those, you'll work with that work-based learning coordinator, and they're going to help determine what the student's schedule is. And so again, you'll be working in collaboration. You won't have to fill this out, but the information that you provided will go here, and you'll determine what the schedule is so that you know exactly when to expect that student to show up and when it is that they have to leave. And then finally, there's a spot for your signature. So again, this looks like it's complicated when you see it, all together, but your role is just to provide that input so that someone else can fill out this paperwork, and then you'll be provided a copy after it's all complete and after you've signed, so that you each have this agreement and you know what all the expectations are. Now, one thing I also want you to note, in this screen, you'll see at the top some employer responsibilities that are outlined here. And so really your responsibilities are, again, to provide that training, to ensure that the student is supervised by someone who is a quality mentor, whether it be, an actual supervisor on the site or an employee who is mentoring that student, to provide some sort of written evaluation of their work behaviors and what they're learning, and then to make sure that your work site is free of hazards. And again, you'll do that through those safety inspections and conversations with the work-based learning coordinator. And then there are a couple other things that I stuck off on the left-hand side of your screen that are also responsibilities. It's really your responsibility to work with that coordinator or that instructor to communicate regularly. They'll be communicating with you, you'll be communicating with them, and that way they can provide the best experience for students. And if you're seeing any issues, they can help tackle those as well. So their role in all of this, again, is to verify that that placement meets the goals, to visit, to check the safety issues that might be present, to make sure that they're helping to instruct that student and provide support at the school site so that they can support you. And then also to record daily attendance for that student. So they're going to be keeping track of that student's behaviors just like you will be. So if you think you might be interested and you know that you want to grow that workforce, what are your next steps? Again, look at what need you have and what level of participation you might be comfortable with. We are thrilled to have you start anywhere, because just getting students an experience and interaction with employers is important. The more that we can get them to interact with you, and the more that we can help them see what it's really like to be at a workplace, the better prepared they'll be when they leave us in high school and they come work for you. Then the next step is to contact your local CTE administrator. So get in touch with them, let them know what you're thinking, have a conversation. And, even if you're not sure what to think, have a conversation. They'll be able to tell you what opportunities they are providing, and they might be able to connect you with teachers in the classroom. So I just want to point out again, Jenny, who has been so gracious to set this up for everyone. In Saginaw, she is your contact. So she's your expert that can put you in touch with whoever you might need to talk to. And if you're here and you're not from Saginaw County, again, go back to that Getting Started guide that you'll get, click on the CTE administrator link, and you'll be able to find the person in your area that you need to connect with. So what I'd like to do now, I know Jenny would like to have an opportunity probably to speak for a minute and talk about a couple of things. And I know that we're going to open it up for some questions. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Selena. And I do think that that key, if you don't know how to begin, if you start with your CEPA director, they can point you in the right direction. Even if you're not looking for CTE specific work-based learning and you just don't know who to contact, your CEPA director does know who to contact, and they can put you in contact with those folks at the local high school. So even, again, if you're not sure which direction you want to go to, they can be the conduit to helping get you connected. We do have a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to ask those questions on behalf of those that pose those, and then we'll open it up to others. So the first question is, can non-CTE students be provided safety training like CTE students?
And for the folks that ask this question, absolutely, they should be provided with safety training. I think the big difference there is what a CTE student is able to do versus what a non-CTE student is able to do. So you can bring in a non-CTE student and you can work with them, but they don't qualify for some of those exemptions as a student learner because they're not part of that specialized CTE program. So that's probably the big difference, but definitely you want to give all of them safety training because you would do that for anyone that came into your place of employment.
Can I interject here too? This is Jill Hookey with Wage and Hour. You may want to contact MIOSHA's consultation, education. Let me pull up their exact name. MIOSHA's Consultation, Education, and Training Division has some great youth employment information, like youth worker safety on their website, some great literature, and they also come into businesses and do a safety check and safety training. Otherwise, you're probably going to have to look to your local school district for that safety training.
All right, thank you, Jill. The next question is, how often do site visits occur?
And site visits must occur at least every 9 weeks, but they can occur more often. And sometimes it depends on the student learner that you have. There may be some requirements that it needs to occur more often, but the person who will be responsible for that will be the work-based learning coordinator or the instructor, whoever is conducting that. So they'll know the rule and they'll communicate that with you. Now, they may tell you when they're going to visit, or they may just drop in. It all depends on their schedule and what they're able to do. So, and if you ever need site visits to occur more often because you would like to have them pop in and see what a student's doing, whether it be because they need to be checked up on a little bit, or whether it be because they're doing something amazing and someone needs to see it, you can always request that.
The last question I'm seeing in the chat, oops, the second to the last question, hold on. How often are evaluations required?
Those evaluations are really going to depend on your local school district. They'll have a set schedule for that they'll let you know in advance. And there may be some evaluations that they ask for on a fairly regular basis. And maybe not deep evaluations, but just your general feedback about the student's performance, say that particular week. Some school districts have you turn in just a little bit of feedback about what the student's been doing or how they've been performing when you verify their attendance. But again, talk with your local district or whoever it is that you're working with there. They'll kind of know that schedule and they'll set that expectation for you.
Okay, next question. How does it work with state licensing constraints requiring individuals to have a high school diploma before working in the security field? Does this still apply?
That's a question that I may have to get some more help on for that particular area. But I will say that sometimes a student isn't allowed to be a paid employee without a particular license or without being a particular age. But that doesn't mean that you can't still participate in some sort of work-based learning activity where you bring them in maybe to job shadow or to do something that isn't that particular job, but it's a supporting role. So I would probably, we could do some looking for you and get the answer to this question, but I would say you also may want to ask some of the agencies in your field and see if they're doing anything unique that you can pull from.
And Selena, if you get the answer to that, I can send that out also as part of these documents.
Perfect.
What is an ideal amount of hours per week for a student to work in a work-based learning environment?
And I'm going to defer this question to Lee and Jill because they are the experts in both of these areas. But I will say at a minimum, when we're looking at employment, we're looking for about 10 hours a week at a minimum. But Lee and then Jill, do you want to hop in on this? Because I know that you're the experts here.
I'm going to go first, Jill.
Sure, I can do that. I mean, the Youth Employment Standards Act has hours that are restrictive for kids, but if they have a work-based learning contract on file at your place of employment, they become exempt from the Youth Employment Standards Act because the school district is picking up the supervision of that minor's situation, which means we don't regulate their hours anymore. So that's kind of it. If it's a valid work-based learning contract and it's on file at the work site, we don't regulate their hours. That contract does and the school district does.
So work-based learning, the state approved work-based learning, the maximum number of hours would be 24. So it needs to be tailored to their work training plan and training agreement and what the employer necessarily needs or what the student needs out of that training. That being said, we got to remember that if you have them in a training plan or training agreement, and I'm going to hit on this a little bit, is that if they're not paid and you have them in a task, you make sure that your training plan is updated every 45 hours that they're on site. So the students, there's really the maximum number is 24 in a week, unless it's a holiday week, and then they can go, you have to follow the rules. I think it's 40 hours, but then they can only work 6 days out of 7 in a row. And so, and it's only 8 hours in a day. All those rules still apply. But again, 24 hours maximum. And Selena wants them at least there 10 hours a week. And remember, you can take students, when we think about youth or the work-based learning, we think about work-based learning and you're thinking for a whole semester or whatever you've got. If you've got something that you want them to do for a shorter period of time, those work-based learning opportunities can be achieved in that. Let's say you need something or you think that you can help someone out and you can only do it for 6 or 8 weeks or even 9 weeks, then that is an opportunity for that student to experience those. So I don't want to think that you got to take the student for the entire year, but I want to say that experience would be more robust for them. But again, if you have an experience where, let's say you're putting down tile or you're doing things that you want to show that student and you think that this is an opportunity for them, or if you want to rotate some students through that, don't be afraid to go ahead and do that and rotate students through and become more of a training facility or a training environment for these individuals. And then you can see the level, and then you aren't necessarily hooked into those individual students for a long period of time. And then if you're looking for a particular type of student that you want or a particular type of worker that you want, then you can see more workers through that program.
Thank you.
And Jenny, sorry if I can jump in, we made a great point. There are opportunities for you to do a smaller number of hours and rotate those students through. And again, if you hear this and go, oh my gosh, I can't remember all those rules, know that your district understands what those are. And so you can always go back to them and say, okay, what's the rule for this? Or here's what I want to do. Is this feasible? And how do I make this work? And they'll know those things for you too.
The next question is to do with healthcare. We get this one a lot. Healthcare has confidentiality concerns. How would you address these?
That's a great question, but we see a lot of amazing placements in the health field. And what we do is we train students and we talk about confidentiality early on. We talk about that in the classroom because they need to know that that's a part of the profession. And then a lot of times our health students go through orientation and training with your business where the expectations for your particular business are covered again. And confidentiality is one of those things. So that's a topic that keeps coming up with students. And again, they understand that that's a part of the profession. if we ever had students where we were concerned about confidentiality, the instructor would share those things with you and share those concerns, because we do sometimes have students that aren't appropriate for certain placements. They just might not be mature enough at that point in time. And so the instructor at the school is going to watch for those things. But I would say in general, we have great healthcare placements and great partnerships across the state. And we haven't seen that as being a big concern because of the level of training that goes on.
I would concur with that. HIPAA training is integrated into all the health programs I've ever worked with at the high school level. And then if they do get placed on site, like here in Saginaw, we have a wonderful partnership with Covenant Healthcare where the students are on site at the hospital every single week, and they go through their training as well. So we understand that that is of great concern and make every effort to ensure that students are provided that training. And sometimes they even get a certificate of completion to show that they've received that they can put into their portfolios. All right, hang on one second. We've got another question in the chat, but my mouse was not cooperating. Speaking of confidentiality, what about proprietary information or trade secret information? How do you train for those types of situations? Excellent question.
That is an excellent question. And I think it mirrors a lot of what we talked about for health. If it's an industry where we know that those things are occurring, like in business or that type of thing, we talk with students about that in advance. But then we also want you as an employer to set your expectation. It's always better when we hear something multiple times and from multiple people. And it's always a good idea to be very clear about what is a trade secret or what is proprietary, just so that a student doesn't make a mistake because they don't know. So again, a lot of times these students who are coming out and being part of this experience have gone through a significant amount of the curriculum already. They've had a lot of that training and they're mature and ready for that. So I would say just make sure that you're covering it on your end as well and being very clear about what they can and can't do, because expectations help us all.
And to add to that, I would also say work with, particularly if you're looking at through a CTE program, work with that instructor. So if you are looking as a company, cybersecurity is the one that always comes to mind, because we need folks to be able to help fill those industries and have those skill sets. But because of the concern with sensitive information, sometimes there's hesitancy. So I think working with that instructor and talking about the kinds of confidentiality training and letting that be part of the curriculum, where students, have some specified things that they go through, and there's a sign off, a certificate, an agreement. If they get placed, all of those things, elevate that. And so it's very clear to them before they get placed as to what those expectations are and how to handle things. Do employers? Go ahead.
I want to say that with some of these, you talked about cybersecurity, but some of these students are working with the U.S. Department.
Defense.
So a lot of U.S. Department of, we want to talk about it, but at any rate, Department of Defense and stuff like this. So they're already sitting in classrooms working on this material, and the instructor gets a special waiver to work for the USDS or the U.S. Department or whatever they're working with. So those students are most of the time before you see them, if your cybersecurity is an issue, they already understand that they're working within an egg when they're in that situation, and they understand the transfer from when they're in the classroom and when they're not, because they're firmly aware that if they do anything that is not within the classroom setting, that they can be, and it is pointed out to them, or that they could be fully punished under all laws when they're not within the classroom setting. So those are some of the things that they go through, and those things are pointed out, as with all. And I want to glass over this, and I don't know that we want to say this, but I think of Edward Snowden. I mean, he was an adult. So if you got situations where these individuals are going to have the propensity to do these things, no matter how much we train or what they sign, they're still going to do them, and they're throughout the entire society. But we do our best to make sure that these students are on the up and up, and making sure that they are not going to be on that end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Thank you, Lee. Do employers apply their standard performance management and feedback to CTE students, or does this fall under the training plan and agreement?
So I think what's being asked, if I understand the question correctly, is are you going to use your same like performance measures for a student that you would use for anyone else in your business? Or is the training plan and training agreement going to specify how you evaluate that student? And I think if I'm understanding that right, that's a really good question. So it may be a mix of both. And it may depend on whether you're paying that student as a paid employee or not. That's something that you'll talk about with the instructor or the work-based learning coordinator ahead of time and find out what their expectations are. And I think it's a great idea to share how you typically do that, because most of the time we would like to see a student really have a full experience. So if you have certain expectations in the workplace and there's a type of feedback that you give, that might be a great thing for a student to experience. It might not be a good fit if there are things that they haven't learned or skills that they haven't developed yet. And so that's where that conversation comes in.
And just a note on the bottom of that from the person that posed the question, agreeing, particularly if discipline is necessary, poor attendance, performance, etc. Absolutely.
And anytime you run into issues, again, you know, poor performance, things that are questionable ethically, or, you know, lack of integrity or poor attendance, we want you to reach out right away to that school district personnel and to talk to them about what's happening, because sometimes they can correct that or help correct that on their end as soon as they know. And it's that partnership that we develop between the work site and the school is really important to us. And so we want to make sure that things are going well. So if something's not going well, reach out right away, and the two of you can usually collaborate on how to handle that. And definitely that school district will be working on their end to make sure that those things don't continue.
If the student is paid, who pays the wages?
Most of the time, if the student is paid, that's the employer who pays those wages, and the student becomes an employee of your business. There are a couple of different scenarios that occasionally pop up. So if there's something else that, you know, that's a different scenario that you can think of for your workplace, I would reach out again to that school district and talk about that situation.
Okay. Those are all the questions I'm seeing in the chat currently. Are there any other questions?
Jenny, can I just make a comment?
Absolutely, Steve.
Yep. Oh, excuse me for a minute.
The joys of virtual meetings, right? You can't control your background. Well, we're waiting for Steve. Any other questions?
I'm so sorry, everybody. Yeah, just more of a comment. We meet with Saginaw Future meets with over 200 employers in a year, you know, across all spectrums, but primarily manufacturers. And my comment is, you know, what we're finding is employers are much more willing to look at different avenues to find talent. Talent's their number one issue, has been, still is, will be. And so my comment is, it'd be great to have another tool in the toolbox. So, you know, I just think this is really, really important. We met with Delta the other day, you know, that would be a link here, you know, because they could go from these programs over to Delta, and then they could, you know, get some employer time that would, you know, could go towards certifications or degrees. So I really liked how you addressed all those employers' concerns. I mean, those were right on. Those are the ones I kept hearing over and over every single time we would mention, whether it be high school or college. So it'll be really nice to have those. You talked about putting together like a draft, and we can share those with the employers.
Wonderful.
So that's just the comment I wanted to make. I just think this is really important, and really excited to be able to offer our employers another avenue to seek talent. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And you bring up a great point. A lot of times students might, because we have really strong seamless partnerships with our post-secondary partners as well. So here in Saginaw County, of course, Delta College is on our back door, and there are our Perkins partners. So a lot of our credit agreements dovetail. They start from the high school CTE program, and they smoothly transition into post-secondary, resulting in a credential. and learn and earning credentials along the way. So you talked about certifications and things of that nature. And with our early middle college opportunities, they can complete entire certificates and associate degrees. And this isn't done in a vacuum, it's done with partners. So so absolutely, that's a very good point. Sometimes we see students that start as high school co-ops with a company, and then they move on to post-secondary in the same region, and they continue in that area and maybe at a higher level of employment. So as their skills grow, so does their employment, and then they become this lifelong employee for a company. So it is really a great way to start building that pipeline. All right, thank you, Allison. I was just looking in the chat. Any other questions?
Jenny, this is Julie Molesky from Next Year. I just want to say thanks on behalf of the employers for holding this. This gets a little bit confusing for us, and I know that you know that we've wanted to start one at Next Year for a long time, and so hopefully all of this being pulled together to make it easier for all of us will help many of us, and hopefully we can see the region as a whole move forward to have more high school students employed, because I think it's something that's definitely necessary. I know I co-opted in high school, which might have been 200 years ago, it feels like, but I know that it was a really valuable experience. So I just want to thank you and thank all the presenters today for making yourselves available, because this was very helpful.
Thank you, Julie. I also am a product of co-op. It was in an effort to get out of a high school physics class, but I would never have ended up in education had it not been for that experience. So could not agree more. And that is our goal here locally and probably in many other regions throughout the state, is to really develop a robust internship program for our county. It's CTE is workforce development, and we want to make sure that we are working in tandem with our employers to bring you the talent that you would like to, or that you need to help fill those important gaps that you're looking for in your companies. So, all right, if there are any, I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I will, at some point today, you will be receiving in your inbox a copy of this recording, as well as the PowerPoint presentation that Selena shared and the 2 draft documents that she referenced. So before we go, I'm going to turn it back to Selena for some final words.
Oh, thank you. You know, I just want to say your goal is our goal. I mean, we are all working toward the same thing, because a successful student is one who can successfully transition and become a successful employee. So on our end, if there's anything that you need as employers that we aren't providing that we could provide, if there are resources, if there's information, if you tell us what you need, we're here to help. So please let us know, because we want to be partners with you. And again, our end goal is the same. So thank you so much. And thank you for being willing to engage with students and with your community to build a stronger workforce.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.